Simon Ekpa's final court judgment in Finland is scheduled to happen by the end of July 2025 at the Pyhäjärvi District Court in Lahti, with 3 judges presiding independently over charges such as incitement to violence, terrorism-related offences, hate speech, and arms trafficking. The courtroom will include high-security measures, international media, human rights observers from nations like South Korea and the United States, Nigerian embassy officials, family members, ipob supporters, and opposition figures. Each judge will deliver a personal verdict on each charge, after which a collective decision will be announced. If Simon Ekpa is found guilty, he may appeal the ruling, and a civil rights case could follow if rendition violations are confirmed. Leaked FBI documents have linked President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to 1990s Chicago drug cartel cases, causing embarrassment during his recent BRICS summit appearance, where his vague speech on climate change avoided key issues like corruption and insecurity. Deputy Prime Minister of Finland publicly criticized Nigeria's inclusion in BRICS, citing Tinubu's drug links as a stain on the organization and calling him a confirmed presidential drug dealer. The Nigerian federal government has confirmed open negotiations with Nnamdi Kanu, offering conditional release in exchange for dropping legal actions he filed over his illegal abduction and human rights violations. Old 2021 statements by Nnamdi Kanu, warning of armed supplies to bandits via helicopters, have come true, with new evidence showing helicopters were indeed used to transport weapons, leading officials to now call him a prophet. Dr. David Matsanga and Dr. Ngozi Orabueze have launched a Pan-African campaign urging African nations and diasporas to boycott European Union products and diplomacy, condemning post-colonial oppression and Finland's treatment of African detainees. Abubakar Malami, former Attorney General of Nigeria, is under fire for orchestrating the illegal abduction of Nnamdi Kanu from Kenya, with calls for his disbarment after Kenya's High Court ruled the rendition unlawful. Reverend Father Mbaka publicly prayed and called for Nnamdi Kanu's release during a service in Enugu, while other global figures like Ibrahim Traore and Dr. Matsanga strategize behind the scenes to secure freedom for both Simon Ekpa and Nnamdi Kanu. In the heart of Finland, inside a high-security courtroom tucked within the city of Lahti, a defining moment in international justice and African activism is about to unfold. The month is July 2025, and the name on everyone's lips, from Abuja to Helsinki, from New York to Seoul, is Simon Njoku Ekpa. This controversial Biafran separatist figure, who has been both revered and reviled, depending on where one stands politically or emotionally, is standing trial in one of the most carefully watched court proceedings of the decade. His final judgment day has now been scheduled to take place before the end of this same month, and as the world prepares to witness the outcome, the details surrounding the trial, the charges, the political undercurrents, and the potential aftermath are becoming clearer and more intense. Simon Njoku Ekpa, who rose to prominence after the extraordinary rendition of Nnamdi Kanu in 2021, has since become a central voice and rallying figure in the movement for Biafran independence. His fiery broadcasts, controversial directives such as sit-at-home protests, and alleged links to armed groups operating across southeastern Nigeria have drawn sharp condemnation from the Nigerian government, as well as praise and loyalty from thousands of followers. Now, seated on the defendant's bench at the Pyhäjärvi District Court in Lahti, Simon Njoku Ekpa faces not just the Finnish legal system, but also the weight of international attention, African political intrigue, and the hopes and fears of millions of Biafrans who view his trial as more than just a legal affair. It is to them a referendum on freedom, justice, and survival. The courtroom where this final judgment is scheduled to be delivered has been transformed into a fortress. Finnish authorities have taken extraordinary security precautions with military-grade surveillance systems, strict access control, and multiple layers of police presence. Only accredited persons are allowed anywhere near the building, and even then, they must pass through background checks, body scanners, and facial recognition systems. Inside, the courtroom itself will have 3 presiding judges seated behind a long bench of polished Scandinavian wood. These judges, each of whom will independently deliberate and issue verdicts on the various charges, will be scrutinized by global observers, legal professionals, and media institutions from all over the world. The list of charges leveled against Nnamdi Ekpa is extensive and deeply serious. He is being tried for incitement to violence, terrorism-related offenses, hate speech, and illegal arms trafficking. Each of these charges carries significant consequences in Finnish law and under international legal standards. What makes this trial uniquely structured is the method of judgment. Each of the 3 judges is expected to deliver an independent ruling on every single charge. Only after all the judges have given their opinions will the court issue a collective, unified decision. This process, designed to remove bias and reinforce judicial integrity, has also built immense suspense and speculation as to what direction the final outcome may take. Nnamdi Ekpa, flanked by his legal team and supported emotionally by his family members, has remained composed and defiant throughout the court proceedings. On numerous occasions, he has declared himself innocent, insisting that he is a freedom fighter, not a terrorist, and that his actions are motivated by a deep-seated desire to liberate the indigenous people of Biafra from what he describes as systematic persecution and oppression. His defense team has attempted to build a legal firewall around him, citing international human rights laws, Finnish constitutional protections, and a range of expert testimonies. But the prosecution has come equally prepared. Finnish state prosecutors have presented digital evidence, including social media broadcasts, intercepted communications, and records of financial transfers allegedly connected to arms deals and incitement campaigns in Nigeria. As the courtroom prepares to deliver the final judgment, the audience expected to be present reflects the significance of this case beyond Finnish borders. Representatives from the Nigerian embassy in Finland have been formally invited and will be seated among international human rights observers from countries such as South Korea, the United States of America, and several member states of the European Union. The presence of a South Korean delegation is particularly symbolic, given that civil society organizations from Seoul have recently taken an active role in advocating for Nnamdi Ekpa's human rights. Likewise, delegates from the United Nations Human Rights Council and Amnesty International are expected to be present, watching closely for procedural fairness and legal neutrality. Beyond diplomatic observers, many members of the indigenous people of Biafra are also set to be in attendance, though in a limited capacity due to security constraints. For the Biafran supporters, this court session is about more than legality. It is about dignity, identity, and survival. On the other side of the political aisle, opposition figures from both Nigeria and Finland who have criticized Nnamdi Ekpa's activities as dangerous and destabilizing will also be following closely, hoping that the judgment delivers what they describe as accountability for chaos. The tension in the courtroom will be palpable. When the judges file in to deliver their decisions, every eye and camera lens will be focused squarely on them. The Finnish legal system, known for its impartiality and procedural rigor, will be tested as never before. The stakes are enormous. If found guilty on all or some of the charges, Simon Ekpa could face a lengthy prison sentence in Finland. However, that is not where the story would end. Finnish law allows for an appeals process, and his legal team has already hinted that they will not hesitate to challenge any conviction at higher judicial levels, even up to the European Court of Human Rights. Adding to the complexity of the case is the issue of extraordinary rendition, which has emerged in court discussions and media debates. If Simon Ekpa's legal team can prove that his arrest or legal exposure was connected to improper surveillance or foreign interference, a civil rights lawsuit may follow. International human rights lawyers have already drafted potential claims that could be filed against Finnish, Nigerian, and even third-party governments. Some of these claims center around violations of international treaties such as the United Nations Convention Against Torture and the European Convention on Human Rights. As Simon Ekpa awaits his verdict, the political atmosphere in Nigeria is also boiling over. Fresh revelations have rocked the administration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, who is still facing public scrutiny over alleged links to a notorious Chicago-based drug cartel in the 1990s. Leaked documents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation have painted an increasingly troubling picture of his past, casting a dark shadow over his recent appearance at the BRICS summit. During the summit, which was supposed to showcase Nigeria's global leadership, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu delivered a lackluster speech on climate change that noticeably avoided discussion on pressing issues like corruption, human rights, or national security. International delegates reportedly expressed concern over his evasiveness. The scandal surrounding President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has grown even more humiliating following remarks made by the Deputy Prime Minister of Finland, who openly criticized Nigeria's inclusion in the BRICS platform. In a press conference aired across Europe and Africa, the Finnish Deputy Prime Minister called President Bola Ahmed Tinubu a confirmed presidential drug dealer, a statement that sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles and raised eyebrows even among Nigeria's allies. Meanwhile, back in Nigeria, government sources have confirmed that open negotiations are now underway between federal authorities and Nnamdi Kanu, the original leader of the indigenous people of Biafra. These discussions reportedly include a conditional offer for his release in exchange for dropping all legal actions he filed concerning his unlawful abduction from Kenya in 2021. This marks a significant turning point. For years, the government refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing in the case of Nnamdi Kanu's extraordinary rendition, despite international pressure and condemnation. Now, faced with mounting legal risks and a volatile political environment, they appear to be softening their stance. In an ironic twist of fate, statements made by Nnamdi Kanu in 2021 are now being viewed in a different light. At the time, he had warned that helicopters were being used to supply weapons to armed bandits across northern Nigeria. Many dismissed his claims as conspiracy theories. But recent discoveries, including leaked military reports and eyewitness testimony, have confirmed that helicopters were indeed involved in the illegal movement of arms. This has led several media outlets and politicians to refer to Nnamdi Kanu as a prophet, highlighting the tragic truth behind his once ignored warnings. In response to Finland's handling of Simon Ekpa's detention, African intellectuals and human rights activists such as Dr. David Matsanga and Dr. Ngozi Orabueze have launched a bold and unapologetic campaign across Africa and the global diaspora. Their campaign calls for an organized boycott of all products, services, and diplomatic engagements with the European Union until justice is served and post-colonial patterns of oppression are confronted. The campaign has found traction in countries like Ghana, South Africa, and Senegal, where civil rights groups and students have begun organizing solidarity protests and economic boycotts. Amid these rising tensions, former Attorney General of Nigeria, Abubakar Malami, is now under increasing legal and professional fire. The Kenyan High Court recently ruled that the abduction and rendition of Nnamdi Kanu from Nairobi in 2021 were unlawful and unconstitutional. This ruling has sparked calls from Nigerian lawyers and international legal bodies for Abubakar Malami's disbarment. Legal scholars argue that he violated both Nigerian and international laws by authorizing or facilitating a rendition operation without due process. Back home in Nigeria, popular religious figures have also begun to intervene in this growing political and legal storm. Reverend Father Ejike Mbaka, during a widely televised service in Enugu, led a powerful prayer session calling for the immediate release of Nnamdi Kanu. His words, backed by an emotional sermon and support from thousands of worshippers, sent a spiritual jolt through both the political and religious communities. Reverend Father Ejike Mbaka's influence among Christians in southeastern Nigeria is immense, and his stance has now made the demand for justice even more urgent and difficult to ignore. In the background, key African figures such as Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso and Dr. David Matsanga of Kenya are said to be holding strategic conversations aimed at forging an African-led diplomatic push to secure the release of both Simon Njoku Ekpa and Nnamdi Kanu. Sources suggest that these discussions include the African Union and several West African governments. The idea is to use African unity as a tool to challenge what is increasingly viewed as selective justice and neo-colonial interference. As Simon Njoku Ekpa's Judgment Day approaches, the atmosphere in Finland is growing heavier with each passing hour. The eyes of the world will soon turn to a single courtroom in Lahti, where 3 judges will deliver a decision that could change the trajectory of African activism, international justice, and the fate of 2 of the most controversial figures in the Biafran movement. Whatever the outcome, one thing is certain: the story is far from over. The verdict will be the beginning of another chapter in a saga that stretches across continents, ideologies, and generations, shaping the struggle for identity, freedom, and justice in modern-day Africa. As the clock ticks closer to the final judgment day for Simon Njoku Ekpa at the Pyhäjärvi District Court in Lahti, Finland, anticipation and anxiety ripple across continents. The gravity of the charges, the volume of evidence, and the symbolic weight of the trial have all elevated this legal case from a regional concern into a global spectacle. Governments, activists, journalists, spiritual leaders, and ordinary citizens alike are watching, many with hope, others with dread. Simon Njoku Ekpa's lawyers, a combination of Finnish legal scholars and international human rights experts, have been working tirelessly in the final days before the judgment. Their strategy has included not only denying all allegations, but also presenting a larger argument that this case is not just about criminal law, but about political persecution. According to them, Simon Njoku Ekpa has become the scapegoat of a global diplomatic game where powerful Western and African nations try to silence dissident voices under the banner of peace and security. His legal team has accused the Finnish authorities of bowing to Nigerian political pressure and violating Simon Njoku Ekpa's right to free speech. They argue that his controversial broadcasts were political expressions, not criminal provocations. To back up their arguments, they presented expert testimonies from political scientists, freedom of expression advocates, and journalists who outlined the growing global trend of labeling political dissidents as terrorists in order to justify crackdowns. On the other side of the courtroom, Finnish prosecutors have built a case they say is grounded in hard evidence. They have shown the court video clips, financial records, call logs, and social media activity that allegedly ties Simon Njoku Ekpa to violence in southeastern Nigeria. One of the most damning pieces of evidence presented was a video in which Simon Njoku Ekpa appeared to give a coded message interpreted by the prosecution as an instruction for attacks. They also claim to have traced funds from Finland to Nigeria that allegedly helped sponsor the logistics of armed groups. Prosecutors emphasized that Finland's laws do not allow for incitement even if carried out from abroad, and that public safety must be preserved over political ideologies. They warn that allowing such behavior under the guise of free speech would set a dangerous precedent, not only in Finland, but across the European Union. Meanwhile, as the court prepares to hand down its ruling, thousands of supporters of the indigenous people of Biafra continue to hold peaceful vigils and protests across Europe, Africa, and North America. In London, a group of Biafrans gathered outside the Finnish embassy, waving flags, chanting songs, and holding up placards that read "Free Simon Ekpa" and "Justice for Biafra." A similar demonstration took place in Toronto, where several Canadian lawmakers were seen speaking in solidarity with the demonstrators, urging the Finnish government to consider the wider implications of the verdict. Across southeastern Nigeria, where the emotional pulse of the Biafran movement beats strongest, the situation is tense and unpredictable. Security has been heightened in towns like Enugu, Aba, Owerri, and Onitsha. Intelligence reports indicate that some factions of the indigenous people of Biafra are planning major demonstrations and civil disobedience campaigns depending on the outcome of the Finnish court ruling. The Nigerian government, aware of the potential for unrest, has increased police and military patrols in volatile areas, hoping to prevent chaos. But it is not just Simon Njoku Ekpa's verdict that is rattling nerves across the region. The confirmed negotiations between the Nigerian federal government and Nnamdi Kanu have also introduced a new layer of complexity. Many Biafrans are deeply skeptical of any offer from the Nigerian authorities, especially one that requires Nnamdi Kanu to drop his lawsuits over the extraordinary rendition and the human rights abuses he allegedly suffered in the custody of the Department of State Services. Several Biafran lawyers and activists have publicly rejected the idea of a conditional release, insisting that justice must come first. They say that any agreement that sweeps the abduction and torture of Nnamdi Kanu under the carpet will set a dangerous legal precedent. Others within the movement, however, are more pragmatic. They argue that securing Nnamdi Kanu's physical freedom, even if not absolute justice, is a necessary first step, especially with tensions already so high. The dilemma has triggered fiery debates within Biafran circles, both online and in real-life gatherings. Some call for continued resistance until both Simon Njoku Ekpa and Nnamdi Kanu are free and legally vindicated. Others urge caution, pointing to the suffering of civilians and the urgent need for a political resolution. Adding yet another layer to the unfolding events is the resurgence of attention on the former Attorney General of Nigeria, Abubakar Malami. The ruling by the Kenyan High Court, which declared the abduction of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu unlawful, has sparked serious questions about Malami's conduct during his time in office. Legal experts argue that he not only violated international law, but may have committed criminal acts by coordinating with foreign agents without a proper warrant or extradition request. As pressure mounts for accountability, several Nigerian lawyers have filed complaints with the Nigerian Bar Association and international legal bodies demanding that Abubakar Malami be investigated and possibly disbarred. These legal challenges are part of a broader movement to correct what many see as systemic abuses of power within the Nigerian justice system. Internationally, voices continue to speak up in support of both Simon Njoku Ekpa and Mazi Nnamdi Kanu. Dr. Ngozi Orabueze, who has become a key figure in the global Biafran campaign, has made appearances on international media platforms like Al Jazeera, BBC World News, and France 24. In her interviews, she has condemned what she describes as the hypocritical silence of Western democracies that claim to support human rights while turning a blind eye to state-sponsored violations in Africa. This is the end of our news update. Please click the icon on the top right corner of your screen to watch my next video. You will enjoy it. I will see you again in my next update. Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye for now.